Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi Annie, how's the research going?
Okay, I guess, but I'm concerned about our presentation topic. We're mainly going to be talking about how products are marketed differently for boys and girls, and we know that's true in some countries, but is it the case everywhere?
I've been reading about the situation in the UK. Some of the major retailers have been labelling their products to say which gender a product is meant for.
Really?
Yes. Apparently, toys connected to science subjects are labelled for boys, and stuff like kitchen equipment says for girls.
Does that happen in other countries too?
Hopefully our survey can tell us that, whether it's a global phenomenon or not. But it's interesting because in the UK, so many parents have complained about this kind of labelling that the major retailers are having to abandon it. Because of social media, consumers can put a lot more pressure on retailers to drop unpopular policies.
When it comes to how stores display toys, what most parents would find useful is for stores to indicate how old the child should be, so the toy isn't overly complicated. I'm sure parents don't need gender-specific labelling. You can see for yourself what the general idea is, whether it's for chemistry or building.
That book by that neuroscientist, Lise Elliott, what was it called?
Pink Brain, Blue Brain.
That's it. There was a lot of material on the way advertising can affect children. Her arguments really make sense.
Yes, some claims are very convincing. Even though she's mainly talking about the USA, I'm sure they can be applied elsewhere.
One thing I highlighted was how marketing products according to gender can cause problems for children in the future.
For example?
If you signal to girls that science and engineering stuff isn't for them, then surely they grow up believing that that's what boys do, even if they study science and physics at school. They might not regard those subjects as something they'll eventually make a living from.
So those are jobs they won't consider. And if you never encourage boys to play with toys that develop socialization skills, that's not fair either.
Maybe, but the consequences aren't as problematic.
Not sure about that. Actually, I think that's something we should address during the presentation.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Let's talk through the section about clothes for children.
The way we've ended up with specific colours for each gender.
One thing I found surprising is that children in 19th century America used to be dressed in white.
Yes, until age 6. It was because the outfits were a lot easier to clean.
Yes, they just bleached them to get the dirt out. Nothing to do with fashion or cost. There was no other effective way to clean them.
Then, in the early 1900s, I read that boys were dressed in pink and girls in blue. Apparently pink was described as dominant, whereas blue was seen as delicate.
Yes, and ordinary people, shoppers I mean. They could read articles about the sons and daughters of the famous and how they were dressed, and they wanted their own children to be dressed the same.
But by the 1940s, the colours had changed, and it was more about customer demand. Retailers analysed the shopping habits of parents and looked at the results, and they interpreted them to mean that pink was now the favourite colour for girls and blue for boys. So shops started to advertise the products accordingly.
Yes, and in the USA, it was a time when boys dressed like dad and girls like mum. It wasn't until the 1960s that teenage girls rejected that, and older teenage girls started wearing clothes that could have been worn by either boys or girls. By doing that, they felt the job opportunities usually only open to men would now be available to them.
But then in the 1980s, for the first time, TV commercials targeted children specifically, promoting different types of clothes for boys and girls. And as a result, children started insisting their parents buy them the right kind of clothes.
That kind of consumer behaviour will be hard to change. And one researcher, Paoletti, she maintains that women who never got to wear pretty, typically feminine clothes when they were little, well, they're now dressing their girls in that style to make up for it.
They want their girls to have what they didn't.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.